walk city streets where minarets and skyscrapers share one skyline. You pray the same words your grandparents did, yet feel eyes questioning your loyalty to mosque or nation. Is your faith a bridge or a barrier? This is the paradox of Muslim identity in the West. When does seeking belonging become losing yourself? I'm Fakir al-Kamosh. Today, we begin unpacking the tension between assimilation's promise of acceptance and isolation's refuge in purity. Prepare to question everything you thought you knew about being Muslim in exile. Promise of acceptance. Western secularism offers civic equality, citizenship divorced from creed. At work, in school, under the law, your faith is meant to be private. For many, blending in means climbing corporate ladders, winning social approval, and silencing any marker of difference. Cost of camouflage. Each time you shed visible piety, no hijab, no prayer breaks, no halal confession, you gain a small victory. Yet that victory often tastes of betrayal. Your mirror shows a stranger, someone who prays silently at home, whose tongue whispers the Shahada only behind closed doors. Generational fault lines. First-generation migrants cling to traditions as anchors in a foreign sea. Their children, born into Western norms, see tradition as chains. The result? Homes split by code switching and kitchen table debates over Friday prayer versus football practice. Spiritual dislocation. Assimilation promises respect, but often exacts conformity. You learn to joke about Ramadan to fit in, privatize your fasts, and compartmentalize your values. Over time, the public man and the private Muslim diverge, fracturing your inner world into fragments of identity. When belonging becomes erasure, in pursuit of acceptance, you risk forgetting the very essence that shapes your moral compass. The mosque's call fades into a memory, the Quran's verses become bedtime stories, and your faith becomes a hobby rather than the air you breathe. Turning away from a world that misunderstands you, you gather among your own, prayer circles in basements, halal cafes on every corner, WhatsApp groups where every message affirms your faith. Isolation promises purity and protection. Yet every fortress arrests more than just culture. It imprisons the soul. Building enclaves. In Western cities, Muslim communities often cluster into ethnic or sectarian neighborhoods. Masajid rise beside kebab shops, madrasa flags fly in shop windows, and street signs cue prayers. These enclaves offer security, a space where you needn't explain your fasting, your Friday sermon, or your hijab. Community as comfort, and cage inside, belonging feels absolute. Shared language, shared values, a shield against Islamophobia. Yet the same walls amplify gossip, enforce conformity, and punish deviation. A woman who questions gender roles or a youth who embraces Western art can find themselves ostracized, more vulnerable than before. Digital ghettos, online, algorithms funnel you into echo chambers, Facebook groups and Telegram channels where every opinion echoes yours. Here, doubt is branded as betrayal and nuance drowned by unanimity. The comfort of agreement breeds intellectual atrophy. Critical thought starves in the absence of challenge. The price of insularity. Isolation preserves identity, but at what cost? When you shield yourself from the world's injustices, do you also shield your heart from empathy? When every neighbor shares your beliefs, do you forget what it means to witness other faiths, other strivings, other humanity? Balancing purity and engagement. The Prophet engaged with Jews, Christians, pagans, and learned from them. He did not retreat into exclusivity. True faith, he showed, thrives not in a hermetic bubble, but in dynamic encounter. Isolation may protect your creed, but only engagement allows it to grow roots in diverse soil. True belonging doesn't demand cloistered devotion nor frantic assimilation. It asks for bold outreach, a willingness to blur boundaries while holding fast to conviction. Let's examine three models where Muslim identity becomes bridge, not barrier. Dialogue, hubs, and coffee tables. Imagine a cafe where Friday khutbah excerpts are paired with interfaith readings, a verse from the Quran followed by a psalm or a Buddhist sutra. These spaces foster curiosity, not coercion. Over shared espresso and dates, faith becomes conversation rather than confrontation. Such hubs in London and Chicago host monthly scripture swaps, where attendees read each other's holy texts aloud. No proselytism allowed, only listening. The result isn't dilution, but deepened reverence for one's own revelation through fresh ears. Neighborhood service coalitions. In Berlin, Muslim youth join Christian and secular volunteers to run soup kitchens and refugee shelters. Their shared labor rewrites the narrative. Faith isn't private piety, but public mercy. Each ladle of lentil soup carries a verse of compassion into the streets. Critics say working beside non-believers compromises tawhid, but arguably it fulfills the Quran's command to care for the neighbor in need. Q 436. True allegiance to God shines brightest when reflected in service to all humanity. Education beyond walls. Schools like the Interfaith Academy in Toronto integrate Islamic studies with comparative religion, ethics, and civic engagement. Muslim students lead discussions on zakat alongside lectures on secular social justice, learning to see charity as a universal language. At Stanford's Faith and Public Life program, Muslim and non-Muslim scholars co-teach courses on law and spirituality. Students engage in joint research on topics from environmental stewardship to AI ethics, proving that Islamic principles can guide innovation without retreating into isolation. Digital platforms of solidarity. Platforms like #MuslimsForAll gather online pledges to assist communities in crisis, be it pandemic relief or natural disasters, transcending sectarian lines. A Turkish doctor broadcasts live streams offering free medical advice to anyone in need, chanting the Shahada alongside botanical tips for cough relief. Virtual reality initiatives let users walk through an empty mosque, a synagogue, a church, and witness prayers on different days. This immersive exposure dismantles fear of the other, replacing it with curiosity and empathy. Navigating tension. Without capitulation, bridge building doesn't mean abandoning convictions. It means holding them lightly enough to engage without hostility. When a neighbor's festival noise rouses suhoor sleepers, a gentle conversation invokes respect for religious rhythms rather than silent resentment. The courage to ask, "Why do you worship thus?" and the humility to listen without judgment. That is active neighborliness. It rejects both fortress faith and hollow patriotism in favor of a dynamic identity rooted in compassion. Your faith, once the compass of your soul, now meets a maze of permits, regulations, and social norms. As Muslim minorities in the West, we face walls both visible and unseen, zoning laws that ban new mosques, employment rules that clash with prayer times, cultural unspoken codes that demand we tone down our identity. Yet within every labyrinth lies a path forward. Let's chart it. Zoning and the mosque. Question legal barriers. Many towns classify houses of worship under restrictive zoning categories, often lumped with noisy factories or high-traffic venues. Obtaining permits for a mosque can take years, triggering community pushback framed as protecting neighborhood character. Strategic response. Some communities repurpose commercial spaces, warehouses, and storefronts to bypass residential zoning. Others engage in early dialogue with neighbors, open house tours, shared community events that demonstrate mosques are assets, not intrusions. Workplace worship versus corporate culture. Prayer breaks, requesting a private space and brief pause at dawn or dusk, can be seen as inflexibility. Workers face subtle penalties, overlooked for promotions, labeled not team players. Model accommodations. Progressive employers in London and New York have designated faith rooms and flexible schedules. Muslim employee networks lobby HR, provide cultural competency training, and highlight the productivity gains of inclusive policies. Halal food and public institutions, cafeteria. Dilemma. School and hospital cafeterias often lack halal options, forcing families to pack meals or skip communal dining. This segregation undermines social integration. Policy levers. Parent-teacher associations and patient councils advocate for halal certification in public institutions. By framing halal as a universal quality control, emphasizing hygiene and ethical sourcing, campaigners win broader support. Cultural norms and social acceptance. Dress codes, beyond legal bans, social pressure to dress like everyone else erodes visible identity. Women in hijab experience harassment. Men with beards face suspicion. Narrative shift. Storytelling campaigns, video testimonies, local art projects humanize Muslim experiences. When neighbors see real faces and hear real stories, clothing becomes expression, not provocation. Balancing principle and pragmatism, selective engagement. Integration isn't capitulation. It means choosing battles wisely, fight zoning that erases your right to worship, but accept dress codes at certain jobs if it secures livelihood. Every concession must be weighed. Does it protect your faith or dilute it? Collective agency. Community coalitions join interfaith alliances to lobby city councils and legislatures. When Muslims stand with Jewish, Sikh, and Christian minorities, their cause gains moral force, and integration becomes a shared victory. In a democracy, silence is complicity. When Muslims in the West abstain from politics, fearing secular backlash or distrusting institutions, they surrender the very power to shape society. Yet diving in risks, co-optation, and tokenism. How do we wield our vote, our petitions, and our protests without losing what makes us Muslim at heart? The ballot as minbar from pulpit to polling booth. Historically, sermons guided communal action. Today, every ballot stamped is a statement of values, justice, compassion, dignity. Our faith teaches accountability. Our vote must reflect hisab, moral reckoning. Mobilizing the Ummah. Grassroots voter drives in London boroughs and Michigan cities register thousands of Muslim voters each election, turning neighborhoods into political constituencies whose shared concerns, education, healthcare, anti-discrimination, translate Islamic ethics into policy demands. Petitions and public pressure. Digital campaigns. Hashtags like #Stop the Raid and Justice for our Shia have forced city councils to reconsider mosque zoning and police profiling. Online petitions gain traction when combined with small-scale letter writing to representatives, echoing the prophetic model of persistent supplication now directed at lawmakers. Risks of slacktivism. Clicking. Sign is easy, but impact comes when digital pressure meets physical presence. Marches, community hearings, mosque open houses for civil servants. Islam's tradition of amal, work, demands more than keystrokes. Protest is prayer. Walking in dignity. peaceful demonstrations for refugee rights, or against Islamophobia reclaim public space. Each chant of Allahu Akbar on a street corner signals both submission to God and defiance of injustice. Historic echoes. Just as early Muslims protested against ungodly rulers in Medina, modern protests can embody Amr bil Ma'ruf, enjoining good, and Nahi an al-Munkar, forbidding evil, asserting that faith demands public witness, not private piety alone. Representation and office barriers to entry, discrimination, fundraising hurdles, and electability concerns often block Muslim candidates. Yet pioneers like Sadiq Khan in London and Ilhan Omar in Minneapolis show that faith-rooted leadership can thrive. Their campaigns drew on mosque networks, interfaith coalitions, and youth volunteers, transforming community organizing into electoral victories. Maintaining integrity. Once elected, Muslim office holders face pressure to abandon faith-inspired positions. The challenge is to legislate on universal principles, social welfare, criminal justice reform, while rooted in Islamic ethics, refusing to reduce identity to identity politics alone. Coalition building beyond the Ummah interfaith alliances, collaborations with Jewish, Christian, and secular groups on issues like refugee resettlement or climate justice amplify Muslim voices and break isolation. When a citywide coalition demands rent controls or clean water, Muslim concerns become part of a broader moral movement. Avoiding co-optation, alliances risk diluting specific concerns, e.g., mosques targeted by hate crimes, into generic diversity talk. True coalition building honors both shared goals and distinct struggles, ensuring Muslim priorities aren't swallowed in a sea of bland consensus. Balancing faith and pragmatism, purity versus power, insisting on perfect alignment between personal piety and political compromise often means abstention. Yet the Quran urges incremental improvement, enjoin what is good. Engaging imperfect systems to extract justice can reflect prophetic prudence more than rigid moralism. Long-game strategy. The Prophet spent years in alliances, treaties, and community building before overt power. Today's Muslim civic actors must similarly balance immediate gains with sustainable relationships, planting seeds in school boards and town halls that will bear fruit for generations. Faith without action is an echo in an empty hall. For Muslims in the West, our struggles extend beyond mosque doors into movements that define the moral contours of society. How do we transform prophetic compassion into collective force, from standing with Black Lives Matter to feeding the homeless, without diluting our convictions or being co-opted by secular agendas? Anti-racist solidarity, historical echo. The Prophet stood against tribal bigotry and defended the oppressed regardless of lineage. Today, joining anti-racist protests, marching alongside black and brown communities, echoes that legacy. When we chant, "No justice, no peace," we assert that Islam's justice transcends religious boundaries. Risks and rewards. Critics warn that alignment with secular movements risks compromising Islamic distinctives, yet refusing solidarity labels faith as insular. True allegiance to divine justice demands we confront racism wherever it thrives, declaring that oppression of one is blasphemy against all. Mutual aid networks rediscovering Sadaqah, Jariyah. Beyond one-off charity drives, sustained mutual aid, food pantries, rent relief, medical funds, creates a living waqf that circulates blessings. When a Muslim-run clinic treats anyone in need, our devotion becomes tangible healing, not mere rhetoric. Decentralized compassion. Grassroots groups organize via encrypted apps and neighborhood committees, sidestepping bureaucratic slowdowns. This model of agile, trust-based giving mirrors the Prophet's bedside manner, immediate, personal, and unmediated by red tape. Environmental stewardship, Khalifa on the planet. The Quran calls humanity stewards of Earth, Q 230. Joining climate strikes and urban gardening projects brings tawhid into green praxis. When Muslims plant trees in formerly polluted zones, they reclaim sacred responsibility for creation. Theological provocation. Consuming less and caring more challenges both consumerist culture and any faith that reduces worship to ritual alone. Our fasts become fasts from environmental destruction, our prayers accompanied by seeds sown in concrete. Prison abolition and restorative justice. Mercy over retribution. Islam's penal principles emphasize repentance and rehabilitation. Partnering with organizations that offer mentorship to formerly incarcerated Muslims and non-Muslims enacts prophetic pardon. When we oppose mass incarceration, we reject a justice system built on pain and replace it with mercy. Community circles. Inspired by Islamic circle justice, halqa, restorative panels bring victims and offenders together, sharing grief, seeking forgiveness, and crafting reparations. This transforms punishment into healing, aligning secular reform with divine compassion. Refugee welcome and sanctuary, home for the stranger. The Quran repeatedly urges kindness to strangers and migrants. Establishing mosque-based sponsorship programs for refugees enacts ta'awun, cooperation in goodness. When we open our homes and hands, we proclaim that borders cannot constrain divine mercy. Political witness. Publicly declaring mosques are sanctuaries and lobbying for humane asylum policies renders faith a public ethic, not a private creed. Our solidarity becomes a challenge to xenophobia, an unapologetic claim that every soul bears divine dignity. When the streets fall silent, creativity can still roar. For Muslim minorities, art becomes our trumpet and canvas, declaring dignity where laws deny it, voicing outrage where speech is policed. Let's explore how theater, music, and visual art transform houses of worship into stages of resistance, turning passive spectators into active witnesses. Guerrilla theater in public spaces, pop-up performances. In Paris's banlieues and Detroit's suburbs, Muslim artists stage spontaneous street plays depicting everyday Islamophobia, airport detentions, workplace microaggressions, schoolyard bullies. These scenes dissolve the fourth wall. Passers-by become participants, forced to confront prejudice in real time. Provocative format. No scripts handed out. Actors deliver question cards to the audience. What would you do if this were your sister? This uncomfortable intimacy shatters apathy and leaves a bruise of conscience. Spoken word and rap as testimony. Mic check memoirs. Poets recount refugee journeys and identity struggles over gritty beats, each rhyme a verse of survival. Underground slam nights in London and Toronto echo the prophetic tradition of truth-telling, naming injustice with lyrical precision. Cultural fusion. Blending qasida forms with hip-hop flows, artists assert that Islamic heritage and urban culture aren't at odds. Their words resonate in corridors of power, university auditoriums, city halls, demanding policy change through rhythm and rhyme. Visual art, murals and digital projections, mural movements. From Berlin's Kreuzberg to New York's Queens, community-painted walls celebrate Muslim lives lost to hate crimes, juxtaposing Islamic geometric patterns with faces of victims. These open-air memorials defy erasure and reclaim public memory as collective prayer. Projection resistance. Activists beam Quranic verses and testimonies onto government buildings at night, an unlicensed sermon in full view. When authorities attempt to erase the light, the message only becomes more visible, a stubborn refusal to stay in shadows. Musical solidarity, Sufi blues, and neo-nasheed. Sonic bridges, bands fuse oud and electric guitar, singing about border walls and refugee boats. Their compositions borrow maqam scales alongside blues progressions, invoking lamentation and hope in equal measure. Concerts double as fundraisers and forums, raising money for legal defense while sparking dialogue. Challenging norms. Traditionalists decry music as bid'ah, innovation. Yet these rhythms carry prophetic echoes of heartfelt remembrance. When a chorus of Allahu Akbar rises above a riff, it becomes a call to unity, not a battle cry of exclusion. Artivism and spiritual witness. Interactive installations. Exhibits invite viewers to write solidarity notes on mosque-shaped pillars or press handprints in embossed clay, physical acts that bind observer and cause. Each imprint becomes a testament that justice is not a spectator sport. Philosophical provocation. In Islam, beauty is a sign of the divine. When art confronts oppression, it reveals the Creator's mercy in defiance of cruelty. Our unarmed resistance wields paintbrushes and poems as sabers of the soul. As our unarmed resistance finds its voice, we must forge guidelines to sustain impact beyond a single protest or performance. Here is the Code of Dignity, 7 practical pillars for artists, activists, and believers to transform fleeting outrage into enduring movement. Intentional witnessing. Before creating, ask, whose story am I amplifying, and to what end? Ensure your work centers the lived experiences of those most marginalized. True dignity begins when the subject's voice leads, not the creator's ego. Ethical collaboration. Build partnerships across faiths, races, and disciplines. Co-create with community members as equals. Share credit, compensation, and decision-making. This mutual investment prevents exploitation and enriches the narrative. Visible accountability. Establish public feedback loops, surveys, listening sessions, online forums where audiences and participants can critique and guide your next steps. Transparency in process builds trust and deepens communal ownership. Sustainable platforms. Choose venues and mediums that endure, from permanent murals and open-source digital archives to community arts centers. Avoid one-off virality stunts. Invest in infrastructure that keeps the message alive year after year. Intersectional solidarity. Connect your cause to broader struggles, racial justice, gender equality, environmental stewardship, drawing lines between oppressions. A code of dignity refuses single-issue isolation, recognizing that true justice is holistic. Ritualized reflection. Embed moments of collective pause into your projects, closing circles, dhikr gatherings, memorial unveilings, ritual honors, sacrifices, recharges spirits, and reminds participants that activism is sustained by spiritual resilience. Strategic storytelling. Map your narrative arc from awareness to action. Begin with provocation, guide through empathy, and conclude with clear calls to participate, donate, volunteer, lobby, create. Every piece of art or protest should end with a path forward. Art and activism are not mere accessories to faith. They are its living expression. When we wield creativity with intention, compassion, and accountability, we honor the divine call for justice in every medium. Let this code of dignity guide your hands, your voices, and your spirits, so that our unarmed resistance becomes an unbreakable bond of solidarity, courage, and mercy. The revolution of the soul begins with every brushstroke, every verse, every step toward the common good.